Hello, good morning, and welcome to this conference, which I wish is going to be of your interest. My name is Manuel Cobo. I'm veterinarian. I used to work many years ago as veterinary practitioner in cattle practice, both in large animals and dairy farms, and I also did some amount of small animal practice. Today, I am working for Laboratorio Siva, which is a Spanish laboratory engaged in the development and manufacturing of both pharmaceutical products and vaccines. I would like to thank especially to Alphabet for giving me this opportunity to be here. Alphabet is the exclusive distributor of the products of Laboratorio Siva here in Hungary. Today, I would like to give you some tips about how you can use your pharmacological knowledge in order to improve your efficacy in the treatment of bacteria infections with antibiotics. So, we are all aware that the increased resistance of bacteria against the action of antibiotics is a major public health concern. Some of the consequences of these resistances are listed here, like, for instance, increased complications, higher mortality, loss of productivity, increased health cost, etc. Some of the causes behind these increased resistances are, for instance, the overprescription of antibiotics, also the overuse of antibiotics due to self-medications in human patients or to the use of pharmaceutical products by farmers without the prescriptions of veterinarians. Also the fact that both human patients or veterinary farmers do not finish the entire treatment period, so this favors the creation of resistances. And also the pharmaceutical industry has lost somehow the interest in the development of new molecules because, well, fortunately this business is not as profitable as it was before, and also the regulatory requirements have increased a lot. Also the pressure towards the decrease of use of pharmaceutical products makes that this sector is not as interesting as it was before. And at the same time, we as veterinarians, we are in the objective of one of the causes behind the increase of bacterial resistances. You might be aware that the European Union wants to decrease the use of antibiotics because they consider that the use of antibiotics in life-producing animals have a relation with the increase of resistances in human patients. Actually, well, there are many professors here, they might know more than me, but as far as I know, it is not 100% demonstrated that there is a direct link between the resistances in veterinary and the resistances in human medicine. However, this is not important because in the media you can read that they have already made a choice saying that definitely there is a relation, and consequently the politicians, which every morning open the newspapers, they said, okay, let's reduce the use of antibiotics. And we as veterinarians, we have to work towards that direction. Consequently, we as veterinarians have to make a wise use of antibiotics. What does it mean? The first thing is we have to do a proper diagnosis. I mean, to determine that really it is an infection caused by bacteria. Then we have to apply our knowledge about the spectrum of action of antibiotics in order to select the correct antibiotic that we shall use for the treatment of this pathology. And finally, we shall use our pharmacological knowledge in order to obtain the best of this antibiotic that we are going to use for the treatment. Now I would like to go very fast through the main pharmacological parameters that we as veterinarians have in our mind when we treat an animal. So basically, we administer a pharmaceutical product, antibiotic, and we obtain a certain plasma concentration. Well, the first parameter that we always consider is the minimum inhibitory concentration, okay? Then we do also take into consideration the maximum concentration that we achieve after the administration of the drug, and also we take into consideration how much time is our plasma concentration, our antibiotic concentration above the minimum inhibitory concentration. Well, we're all aware of that. So taking only those parameters into consideration, we can make a rough classification of antibiotics in concentration-dependent antibiotics, where we basically, what we want to achieve is the higher concentration, plasma concentration as possible. Why? Because this type of antibiotics, the killing rate in this type of antibiotics increases while the plasma concentration is higher. And one example of this type of antibiotics that work this way are the fluoroquinolones. Then we have the time-dependent antibiotics. And here what we pretend is to increase the time or the period where the antibiotic is above the MIC, right? The longer time the antibiotic is above the MIC, the higher will be the killing rate. And one example of an antibiotic that works this way are the beta-lactam antibiotics. And finally, we have a kind of combination of the two parameters, which are the concentration and time-dependent antibiotics. And here, what we try is to maximize the amount of drug, the amount, time, and quantity that is in contact with the bacteria. And one example of this type of antibiotics that works according to this are the tetracyclines. Okay, now that we have just fast revised these pharmacological parameters, I would like to talk about the mutant prevention concentration. This, well, I don't know if you're aware with this concept, but I think it's quite interesting for our veterinary practice. The mutant prevention concentration is determined in the laboratory by determining the MIC, which is the minimum inhibitory concentration of several bacteria belonging to the same family or genera. So we could say that the mutant prevention concentration is the MIC, the minimum inhibitory concentration of the least susceptible bacteria. Just allow me to explain this with an example, right? Basically, we veterinarians, we go to a farm where we have a cow, for instance, with mastitis. So we take a milk sample of this cow of mastitis, and we send the milk sample to the laboratory. And the laboratory performs the antibiogram and determines the MIC for several antibiotics. And according to that, we do the treatment. Well, actually, we start the treatment before, but anyhow, this is useful information if there is a failure in the treatment. In the case of the MPC, the approach is similar, but instead of taking only into consideration the one single strain that you as veterinarian have isolated in a particular farm, this laboratory takes into consideration several isolates taken in different farms for the same family of bacteria during a more or less longer period of time. So basically, we study the MIC then of the least susceptible bacteria. Related with this mutant prevention concentration, we should talk about the mutant selection window. And basically, it's very simple. The mutant selection window is the range of antibiotic concentration that goes between the MIC and the MPC. Again, let me explain you that with a practical example. Basically, well, we have our graphic here again, where we administer our antibiotic and we achieve a certain plasma concentration. If we have done a proper selection of the antibiotic, our plasma concentration should be above the MIC of the bacteria that we want to treat against. At the same time, in the laboratory, it was determined which is the MPC of this bacteria family to which belongs the bacteria you want to treat against. As you can see, the MPC is higher. It needs a higher antibiotic concentration to achieve the MPC value, right? And what falls between the MPC and the MIC is what we call as mutant selection window. Why is the mutant selection window interesting for us? It is interesting for us because the less susceptible bacteria, which are actually the more resistant bacteria, can grow very comfortably. In that if our antibiotic concentration range falls within this mutual selection window. So basically, as you can see here, this mutant selection window is for us as veterinary practitioner a dangerous zone. Why? Because if our antibiotic concentration falls within this mutant selection window, what we are going to do is to favor the multiplication of resistant bacteria. And why are we doing that? It's very simple. Because if our antibiotic concentration is here, what we achieve is to kill all susceptible bacteria. We kill the susceptible bacteria, and then the resistant bacteria will have no competition to multiply. The resistant bacteria will have the possibility to use all the resources, that means all the space, all the nourishment to grow, because they do not have the physical competition of the susceptible bacteria. So the longer we are in this range, the more we favor the multiplication of these bacteria, resistant bacteria, and that's actually what we want to prevent. Saying that, if we look at this curve of antibiotic concentration, you will see that in the first part of the curve, our antibiotic concentration is above the MPC. This is the ideal situation for us. Why? Because here we do kill all the bacteria, the susceptible bacteria as well as the resistant bacteria. Then the antibiotic concentration starts to fall, and we are at the level of the mutant selection window. This is the dangerous zone because here we are favoring the multiplication of resistant bacteria. And finally, the antibiotic concentration falls below the MIC, and here both the susceptible bacteria and resistant bacteria do grow. So, what is the importance of these two pharmacokinetical parameters for us as veterinarians? Basically, we shall take them into consideration in order to avoid bacterial resistance. So basically, when we start a treatment, ideally we should pretend that this antibiotic treatment achieves very fast a high concentration above the MPC, so that it will kill all the bacteria, and then later returns to values below the MIC. And how can we achieve that? We could achieve that, for instance, with the single administration of an antibiotic at a high dosage. Okay, after saying that, I would like to say a few words about marbofloxacin. Because with marbofloxacin, we can achieve this effect that I've just explained. Well, you are already acquainted with this molecule, which is an antibiotic that belongs to the quinolone group and is a third generation quinolone. I have highlighted in red the quinolones that are used in the veterinary medicine. You will see that there are more advanced quinolones, but they are used in human medicine. Well, marbofloxacin is quite active against gram-positive bacteria. It is very active against gram-negative bacteria. And it is very active against mycoplasma as well. Many people get a bit confused between marbofloxacin and enrofloxacin. They believe it's basically the same thing. And they are right in the sense that both have the same spectrum of action. But marbofloxacin, as you can see here in this structure, has this ring which does not have the enrofloxacin. And this ring provides some capability to the marbofloxacin molecule, which is that increase the bioavailability. That means basically that you need lower dosages to achieve the same effect with marbofloxacin than with enrofloxacin. And also at the same time, you have shorter withdrawal periods. Also, marbofloxacin is soluble at a pH of 4. Enrofloxacin, to make it soluble, you have to go to very extreme pH values, and consequently, enrofloxacin-based products are more aggressive in the injection site than marbofloxacin. In this slide, I would like to represent the main pathogens, some of the main pathogens that causes respiratory problems in cattle. Marbofloxacin is very active against all those pathogens. And marbofloxacin is really a good treatment of choice for respiratory diseases. Why? Because we can use it in two administration regimes. One administration regime is a single dose of 8 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, and we have another administration regime where we administer the product for 3 to 5 days at a normal dosage. So you can see that the single dose, the dosage is 4 times more than the single dosage. The single dosage have some advantages, like for instance, you have a less handling of animals, which provokes them less stress and also less labor costs, shorter withdrawal periods, and for me the most important point is that with a single dose we can prevent the growth of resistant bacteria, as I explained just before. So imagine that we have a calf which has pneumonia, and I have represented here the Pasteurella family bacteria that is causing this pneumonia, right? And then we have with marbofloxacin the two choices: 3 days treatment or 1 day treatment, single treatment. So let's go for the 3 days treatment. So we administer our products for 3 days. As you can see here, we achieve a certain plasma concentration, which is above the MIC of most of those bacteria. So we will kill most of the Pasteurella bacteria that is causing the pneumonia. But you see, there are a few of them still survive. These are the resistant bacteria that I was explaining before. Usually, these resistant bacteria, the number is lower than the sensitive bacteria because they are mutants, and because they are mutants, they don't grow as fast as the sensitive bacteria. So the number of them is lower, and therefore the calf immune system would get rid of them. But imagine that for any reason the calf immune system is not working properly. So because we have eliminated the sensitive bacteria, and because our antibiotic concentration falls within the mutant selection window, what we are doing is, without pretending, is favoring the multiplication of these resistant bacteria. How can we avoid that? We can avoid that by the administration of one single dose at much higher concentration, and doing that, we will kill all the bacteria, the resistant and the sensitive bacteria. Okay, now that we come to this point, I'm sure you will be very happy and you will say, Jose Manuel, this is excellent. Now what we are going to do is to administer the product 4 times the normal dosage and then 1 shot, and we get rid of all the bacteria, the resistant, the non-resistant, the highly or intermediate resistant bacteria. Well, unfortunately, life is not that easy. And this mutant prevention concentration concept depends very much on the tandem bacteria antibiotic. So, as far as I know, it has been only studied with quinolones, this MPC concept. And as you can see here, in the case of quinolones with Pasteurella vaccines like Pasteurella multocida and Mannheimia hemolytica, the ratio between MPC and MIC is between 2 and 4. That means that you need between 2 and 4 times the dosage, the normal dosage, to overpass the MPC value. And this, fortunately enough, we can achieve it easily, as I explained to you, with marbofloxacin. However, if we study the same relation quinolones and enterobacteria, you will see that this MPC-MIC relation is 8. That means we should increase 8 times the normal dosage in order to overpass the MPC value. This is not feasible today because we would be coming close to toxicological levels. And finally, as far as I know, in the case of mycoplasma, this concept has not been studied. The problem with mycoplasma is that mycoplasma, they multiply very slowly. And quinolones work very well against bacteria that multiply very fast. So basically, I'm finishing now, when it comes to treat pneumonia in, for instance, calf, we can use very well the 1-dose concept if we want to treat Pasteurella multocida or Mannheimia hemolytica. But if we want to treat mycoplasma, we should go for a longer treatment. What do I recommend usually? I say, well, because sometimes it's quite difficult to know if mycoplasma is involved in pneumonia or not. But definitely mycoplasma is not the killer. The killer is the Pasteurellas. So what I recommend is you do one treatment with marbofloxacin, one shot, and then in the event that you suspect that could be mycoplasma, you can continue the treatment for 3 to 5 days with another molecule, like for instance a macrolide. And that's all. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a nice